Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kidio Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Joy and peace to you and yours, and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Anthony Trollope, one of the most industrious novelists of the 19th century, and a man who understood social pressure the way a carpenter understands grain direction. Trollope wrote about families, travel, class expectations, and all the small frictions that make up a human day. His humor is steady and unsentimental, the kind that comes from close watching rather than exaggeration. Now, Christmas at Thompson Hall, published in 1876, is a travel and misadventure story, a holiday tale built out of the ordinary chaos of being stuck far from home, dealing with illness, and trying to get things right when every step seems to go crooked. What makes it shine is Trollope's precise eye for character, people making mistakes, defending their pride, and doing their best under the tangle of winter travel. We'll read just a small portion today, enough to feel Trollope's calm, observant hand at work and to notice how holiday stories don't always need a miracle. Sometimes they just need a clear record of how folks muddle through with decency. Well, honey, I could read the directions off a bottle of mustard plopped on a train station counter. Even plain words can... Well, honey, I could read the directions off a bottle of mustard plopped on a train station counter, or the plainest words you've ever heard, and it'd still make a little space for peace. Because sometimes the medicine isn't the words themselves. It's the moment we choose to pause, breathe, and remember that nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from Christmas at Thompson Hall by Anthony Trollope. Chapter 1. Mrs. Brown's Success. Everyone remembers the severity of the Christmas of 1870 blank. I will not designate the year more closely, lest I should enable those who are too curious to investigate the circumstances of this story and to inquire into details which I do not intend to make known. That winter, however, was especially severe, and the cold of the last 10 days of December was more felt, I think, in Paris than in any part of England. It may indeed be doubted whether there is any town in any country in which thoroughly bad weather is more afflicting than in the French capital. Snow and hail seem to be colder there, and fires certainly are less warm than in London. And then there is the feeling among visitors to Paris that Paris ought to be gay, that gaiety, prettiness, and liveliness are its aims, as money, commerce, and general business are the aims of London, which with its outside somber darkness does often seem to want an excuse for its ugliness. But on this occasion, at this Christmas of 1870 blank, Paris was neither gay nor pretty nor lively. You could not walk the streets without being ankle deep, not in snow, but in snow that had just become slush, and there was fallen throughout the day and the night of the 23rd of December a succession of damp, half-frozen abominations from the sky which made it almost impossible for men and women to go about their business. It was at 10 o'clock on that evening that an English lady and gentleman arrived at the Grand Hotel on the Boulevard des Italiens. As I have reasons for concealing the names of this married couple, I will call them Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Now I wish it to be understood that in all the general affairs of life this gentleman and this lady lived happily together, with all the amenities which should bind a husband and a wife. Mrs. Brown was one of a wealthy family, and Mr. Brown, when he married her, had been relieved from the necessity of earning his bread. Nevertheless, she had at once yielded to him when he expressed a desire to spend the winters of their life in the south of France, and he, though he was by disposition somewhat idle, and but little prone to the energetic occupations of life, would generally allow himself, at other periods of the year, to be carried hither and thither by her, whose more robust nature delighted in the excitement of travelling. But on this occasion there had been a little difference between them. Early in December, an intimation had reached Mrs. Brown at Pau that on the coming Christmas there was to be a great gathering of all the Thompsons in the Thompson family hall at Stratford-le-Bow, and that she, who had been a Thompson, was desired to join the party with her husband. On this occasion her only sister was desirous of introducing the family generally a most excellent young man to whom she had recently become engaged. The Thompsons, the real name, however, is in fact concealed, were a numerous and a thriving people. There were uncles and cousins and brothers who had all done well in the world, and who were all likely to do better still. One had lately been returned to Parliament for the Essex Flats, and was at the time of which I am writing a conspicuous member of the gallant Conservative majority. It was partly in triumph at this success that the great Christmas gathering of the Thompsons was to be held, and an opinion had been expressed by the legislator himself that should Mrs. Brown with her husband fail to join the family on this happy occasion, she and he would be regarded as being but fainéants Thompsons. Since her marriage, which was an affair now nearly 8 years old, Mrs. Brown had never passed a Christmas in England. The desirability of doing so had often been mooted by her. Her very soul craved the festivities of holly and mince pies. There had ever been meetings of the Thompsons at Thompson Hall, though meetings were not so significant, not so important to the family as this one which was now to be collected. More than once had she expressed a wish to see old Christmas again in the old house among the old faces, but her husband had always pleaded a certain weakness about his throat and chest as a reason for remaining among the delights of Pau. Year after year she had yielded, and now this loud summons had come. It was not without considerable trouble that she had induced Mr. Brown to come as far as Paris. Most unwillingly had he left Pau, then twice on his journey, both at Bordeaux and Tours, he had made an attempt to return. From the first moment he had pleaded his throat, and when at last he had consented to make the journey, he had stipulated for sleeping at those two towns and at Paris. Mrs. Brown, who with no slightest feeling of fatigue could have made the journey from Pau to Stratford without stopping, had assented to everything, so that they might be at Thompson Hall on Christmas Eve. When Mr. Brown uttered his unavailing complaints at the first two towns at which they stayed, she did not perhaps quite believe all that he said of his own condition. We know how prone the strong are to suspect the weakness of the weak, as the weak are to be disgusted by the strength of the strong. There were perhaps a few words between them on the journey, but the result had hitherto been in favor of the lady. She had succeeded in bringing Mr. Brown as far as Paris. Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.